Let's not mince words here. Westeros is doomed.
Doomed!
I am, of course, referencing the, shall we say, controversial final episode of HBO's smash show Game of Thrones. After about a decade of incredible world and character building, the show rushed through a final season whose pacing was about as even as a convention of prime numbers. There's a lot that happened, but the relevant bits are that Daenerys makes good on her promise from Season 2 to lay waste to armies and burn cities to the ground by laying waste to armies and burning cities to the ground. Just a little after that, Tyrion convinces Jon, her nephew/lover, to stab her, and the audience is subjected to the most flagrantly self-congratulatory moment of visual symbolism to ever non-ironically air on television. Tyrion and Jon are tried for treason, and Tyrion manages to spend his trial convincing people to completely revamp the monarchy by having the elites vote on the next king whenever the last monarch dies, with none other than Brandon Stark being the first to assume the throne in this new system. The belief is that putting Bran in charge will break the cycles of cruelty and war that have afflicted the normal people of Westeros since time immemorial. And with regards to this ending, I'm just like, you know what? Fine, whatever. At least Jon gets to pet the doggo at the end. So to own my biases up front, I'm a huge fan of the show, hence why I have like an I drink and I know things shirt and little dragons occasionally around my house. I think that most of my snark and disappointment comes from the fact that the season was so rushed that it forced the writers to try to compress, seasons worth of character evolution into a few minutes. Bran admittedly wasn't who I predicted who would sit on the Iron Throne, and I'd be probably okay with it if it spent more time on telling how he gets there, as the books will undoubtedly do. But even if I agreed with the decision or not, making Bran king and instituting this new political system hasn't actually broken the wheel at all. In fact, Westeros is probably doomed to another bloody civil war in the not-too-distant future. To be fair, a pretty large part of this isn't even Bran's fault. There's a robust literature in political science that deals with the stability of political regimes, and there are lots of things that are pretty well understood to lessen the chances of regime survival. And, there's not a lot of good things going for the new Westerosi administration. For instance, one of the biggest predictors of whether or not a new war will happen is the recency and frequency of civil war. Considering that Bran ascended to the throne thanks to one, and there had been one 20 years prior, it doesn't look so great. A bunch of other research shows that salient social cleavages can also cause problems. While a lot of the newer research is, looking at ethno-racial cleavages, such as those seen in Africa and the Middle East, it can also apply to subnational cleavages that we see in the show. I mean, the North just up and seceded without consequence, and there are at least two other kingdoms, Dorne and the Iron Islands, that have been shown to strongly favor independence from Westeros. So you can probably bet now that Sansa's doing her thing, they're going to want to do their own as well. And state capacity also has a big influence, whether the state is able to clamp down on dissent either through oppression or by diffusing grievances through institutional channels. Higher state capacity tends to mean fewer rebellions, except the political and economic center of the state has just been devastated by a freaking dragon, and it isn't exactly in a position to deal with political upstarts or mobs of angry villagers. So yeah, it doesn't exactly have all that going for it, but part of this is also because of their choice of Bran as leader. Other factors are known to enhance or detract from regime stability too, and one of them is whether or not the leader has any actual political skill. Politics, in large part, is about navigating relationships between elites, people, institutions, holders to the keys of power, you name it. But Bran doesn't exactly have a lot of experience to lean on here. But Peter, you might say, he's a three-eyed raven. His powers allow him unlimited knowledge about the past. He has all the experience of history. Plus, whatever he's lacking, he can rely on Tyrion and the rest of the council to, fill in the gaps, do the hard work. To that first bit, knowledge about what happened before does not make you good at navigating political dealings. Just look at academics. Oh boy, gotta throw in a good cell phone in the video. Self-deprecating humor. That's what'll get you views.
Got him!
Second, there's been research into what scholars call personalism and regime survival, or the degree to which a ruler insists on having as much control over what's going on as possible. And although delegating authority may make things more efficient in democracies, it also puts the ruler in a more vulnerable position. Relying on other people in autocratic regimes mean that they have leverage over what you do and are liable to replace you. And if you think that couldn't happen here, let me remind you that one of the people on the council is Bronn, the upward-seeking mercenary. who is also, by the way, the freaking master of coin. And whoever controls the purse, controls the allocation of resources, controls the implementation of policy, basically has their fingers on the true pulse of power. One of the most important factors in regime durability is knowing where the money is and how to use it. It's almost lethal for autocrats to surrender that power, and Bran has, to someone who has like next to zero conscience. Virtually all of this, the sellswords and the secessionists, could be overcome by what sociologist Max Weber would classify as charismatic leadership. Charismatic leadership is classified as leadership through sheer force of personality, as opposed to resting on legal or traditional grounds. This can be garnered through military or political successes, and in securing the interpersonal loyalty of elites whom help maintain the political order. And there are enough books to fill a floor of the Citadel with how important personality is in politics, especially in new political regimes. And with all this in mind, they chose to put their money on Bran, the guy whose ruling name is Bran the Broken, the guy with literally the personality of, well, Bran Flakes. Honestly, the one who probably would have ended up with the most stable kingdom is Daenerys, mostly because she has the political experience, she's unafraid to consolidate power, and her personality is strong enough to make people adore her despite the fact that she was a ruthless killer several times over. And she also really wouldn't have to worry about state capacity so much since she had the thing that laid waste to the state in the first place. You know, the dragon. Jon probably would have been first runner-up due to his personality and experience, especially if Drogon didn't, inexplicably fly off into the sunset. Damn boy. But even if Dany or Jon had the throne, or in the improbable event that Bran the Broken is allowed to live to old age, that regime wouldn't last much longer than them. Personality-based regimes barely last beyond the people who unite them. Ask Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan. Ultimately, long-term political stability comes from the structure of politics, the institutions and decision rules that determine who is allowed to be in charge and what they're allowed to do while they're there. Tyrion thought that he sufficiently altered the rules of such power such that the regime would be more stable, when in fact, he hardly changed it at all. There are lots of different ways to classify states. You can go by democracy versus authoritarianism, you can talk about the degree of political uncertainty baked into who leads the regime. There's a whole cottage industry in poli-sci that looks at different states and puts them into different buckets. One of the way of classifying things that is helpful to illustrating my point is what's found in The Dictator's Handbook by Bruce Bueno de Mesquita and Alastair Smith. Bueno de Mesquita and Smith look to compare political regimes by the size of three different groups. The population of the state, the people that live there, the subset of the population that is able to play a part in selecting who is going to rule, or that could rule, which is called the selectorate, and then the subset of the selectorate needed for one person to come and stay in power, which they call the winning coalition. The idea is that many rulers strive to keep the selectorate and winning coalitions as small as possible to enhance their personal stability and do whatever they can to keep the winning coalition happy such that they're able to keep a hold of power. We tend to think of places with smaller numbers of selectorates and winning coalitions as autocracies, whereas places with higher numbers for their selectorates and winning coalitions are considered democracies. You can think of North Korea and the United States as prototypical examples. In North Korea, Kim Jong-un relies on a small number of elites to reinforce his rule and prevent others from ousting him. You can probably count on two hands the number of people with real power over there, and he'll strive to keep them loyal and happy through graft and corruption. In the United States, however, the winning coalition for the presidency is a much, much higher number. At minimum, several million people need to come together for someone to assume the office, even if the Electoral College is perfectly gamed. These people would then be kept happy through general welfare programs or laws that satisfy their moral and cultural predilections. And, downright vote buying would be far too expensive when you have to multiply it several million people over. If you think about Westeros pre- and post-political reform, however, you don't actually see much of a difference in terms of the size of the groups with power or the structures that constrain what they're capable of doing. Prior to Tyrion's idea, the Selectorate was about a dozen or so political elites, mostly comprised of high-ranking officials in the court and rulers of the individual kingdoms. They would vie for power through things like political marriages, subterfuge, and murder, if it came to it. Regents had to keep enough of these elites happy to form and maintain their willing coalitions, lest an accident befall them. Wink wink, nudge nudge with the pointy end of a spear on a hunting trip. Because there really aren't any institutions keeping the elites in check, these things were able to fly. There was no outside party going, hey, murder is bad and disqualifies you and your family from holding power. The elites were policing themselves, which went about as well as you'd expect. After Tyrion's idea, well, not much has changed. The Selectorate is still the dozen or so political elites comprised of high-ranking officials and political leaders of the remaining kingdoms. Regents still need to get a winning coalition of these elites, except now the process is out in the open through a vote. Once a ruler dies, it's time to elect a new one. But there weren't any enforcement or oversight mechanisms put in place. They all laughed at Sam's idea of quasi-democratic oversight.
Maybe we should give the dogs a vote as well.
I'll ask my horse.
So what's to stop someone from doing the exact same maneuvers to secure a winning coalition? You know, marriage, subterfuge, and murder, while they wait for the leader to die. Or, you know, since there's no real oversight, why even wait? Just get enough people who would support your quiet coup and have the regent kill in a way that gives you plausible deniability. So really, nothing's changed. The wheel isn't actually broken. Shoot, I doubt that they even managed to dislodge a spoke.
I used to think you were the cleverest man alive.
I'd like to give a quick shout out to a couple of friends of mine, Dr. Amanda Edgell and Dragana Shrivaka. They're both researchers in comparative politics, and Dr. Edgell looks at institutions and authoritarian regimes as well as electoral and gender politics in a comparative sense, and Dragana focuses on ethnic politics in Europe. Both were super helpful in pointing out books and articles to read on this topic, and I'm honestly really glad to know people who, well, know stuff. I put a link down to their websites and socials in the doobly-doo, and you should follow them because they are incredibly smart, working on really cool stuff, and yeah, just go check them out. I'm curious to see what you guys think about the Game of Thrones finale, about Bran sitting on the throne, about Westeros' new political system. I'm curious to see your thoughts on that stuff, any other thoughts that came up while watching this video, or suggesting future topics. I'm always happy to have those down in the comments section below. Looking forward to reading all of them and answering a few in the next office hours. Special thanks to those supporting Professor Politics on Patreon, and I'd like to give a special shout out to Research Assistant Sam Deely. Patrons get exclusive content, early content, and shoutouts. So if you're able to help out with the channel, you can click the link down in the doobly-doo, as well as the end card at the end of the video. Thank you. It's very much appreciated. Last time we talked about the Alabama abortion law and why people support it. Let's see what some of y'all had to say about that. And I did not say y'all in an ironic sense there. I actually use y'all all the time because, you know, Florida may be like the least southern state politically, but it's still a southern state. Okay, I have the colloquialisms. Casual historian chimed in with some thoughts about why some people don't support a rape/incest exemption, as well as some general critiques of my own position which centered around viability. And I think that this comment is important for people to read, and hence why I'm highlighting it. I know that my position isn't 100% philosophically unproblematic, so I'm glad to see good critiques about it. I think that people should see that there are genuine reasons for why people could support a decidedly unpopular position, such as, you know, the one about the rape and incest exemption. I think that, you know, more constructive conversations are going to come from honestly acknowledging and realizing that there are honest and genuine positions on both ends of this that are tugging. As I mentioned before, this is an issue that doesn't cleanly fall onto one dimension. There are multiple legitimate competing moral prerogatives at play here. Paula Thompson asked if I could look at attitudes in Europe about abortion compared to the United States, which, yeah, that sounds freaking interesting. Let's go do that real quick. So Pew released some data collected from 2015 and 2017, which looked at support for a number of different social things in Europe. They were interested in the divide between Western Europe and the rest, so that's why the figure is colored in as it is. As you can see, most of Europe as a whole tends to be more supportive of legal abortion than the United States. If included on the map, we'd be at about where Portugal, Romania, and Armenia are, and the countries near the top tend to be the ones with fewer people thinking that Christian belief is an important part of national identity, although you do have a couple of exceptions, such as, you know, Italy, which is slightly more religious and slightly more supportive on abortion rights. There's a lot of really cool stuff about it, so I'm going to put a link down in the doobly-doo if you want to check out a little bit more, but yeah, fantastic question. I'm glad that we got the chance to look at it a little bit. I just want to let you guys know that it was like really hard just to choose a few comments to respond to this week. There were a lot of really thoughtful comments, a lot of really interesting comments, a lot of comments where people were just putting some really interesting stuff down, or really awesome stuff, or stuff that they were expressing, and I really appreciate all of it. I wish I had the time to be able to address them all here, but I see them, I read them all, and I just wanted to say, you know, thank you. That'll do it for this week. Again, I really appreciate you guys and your engagement with the channel, so I hope that you continue with some awesome comments on this video. Sources for everything is always be down in the doobly-doo, as well as links to Facebook, Twitter, and the blog. Look forward to seeing you guys out there as well. If you enjoyed this video, hope you consider giving it a thumbs up. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by commenting down below, by sharing this video, and by subscribing to the channel so you're in the loop for more awesome social science content is uploaded. If you want to be guaranteed to be in the loop when I upload a new video, be sure to click the bell icon as well. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.